I'd like to welcome you to the 877 Why Islam interview with Dr. Yasser Qadi on the topic of Islamic perspective on sexual deviation. Dr. Yasser, attitudes towards sex in the 21st century are really changing compared to previous periods in history. Modern society is becoming a lot more promiscuous compared to previous eras. And the relationships that happen between consenting adults don't really have any limitation. However, we do realize that the Islamic position, as is the position of many other religions, really prohibits sex between consenting adults, except that within marriage. Why do you think that Islam, as well as some of the other religions, take this position, not adapted to times?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala amma ba'd. First and foremost, Jazakallah khair for having me on the show. I appreciate that, and I'm greatly honored to be here. The question of changing sexual mores and customs is, I think, one of the most profound and one of the most deep questions that moral theologians, that even average people who are studying the basics of history can see and sense palpably. We all know that sexual mores of our fathers, our grandfathers, 2 generations ago, last century, were radically different than the sexual mores of our times. Promiscuity, sexuality, pornography, quote-unquote alternative lifestyles, premarital sex, postmarital sex, extramarital sex. It's all becoming completely legitimate and permissible as long as they're of age and consenting adults. And it's becoming more and more difficult for people who have a different sexual morality, whose sexual morality is guided by religious principles. And by this I mean Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and others of people of faith who are influenced by their religion and who value the guidance of God. They have radically different understandings of sexuality. And the question arises, well, why should we then be so conservative in our sexuality? Why not embrace these passions that God has given us and allow us to do it however we please? Well, I think the response from an Islamic perspective is quite simple. Just like we understand that if we were to eat each and every item available on earth as food, if we were to consume unhealthy food and just eat cholesterol and fat saturated products and just eat and eat and eat without monitoring what we eat, I think every single person will understand that's not very positive for our health. It's very detrimental. We will suffer the consequences of this in the long run, in the short and long run. Similarly, if we were to take any other passion that we have and then make that passion into an obsession, or utilize it to each and every maximum and not even care about possible negative consequences, I think that every rational adult would realize, well, it's going to be harmful to us in the short and long term. What we don't seem to understand, the same thing applies to sexuality. Sexuality is indeed a passion that God has given us. But if we misuse it, if we abuse it, if we use it without bounds, it will also cause us problems. Problems in this world, and of course we believe problems in the next. Now, one thing that I find very amazing about Western sexuality is that it seems to be a backlash against Christian views on sexuality. I want to say Christian, I mean particularly early and medieval Christianity, because early and medieval Christianity viewed sexuality as being something, basically a necessary evil. They viewed human sexuality, they viewed passions, even within marriage, as being something that there's this core of evil in it, and it should be avoided. The only reason we should procreate is for the sake of children. And they viewed anything to do with sexuality as being something from Satan, something that is inherently filthy. We should be ashamed of that. St. Augustine, for example, in his Confessions, he writes about battling sexuality and trying to overcome it as being one of his greatest problems. And because of this, as you know, Catholics to this day, they consider a man of God to be one who doesn't have any sexuality. He should leave or try to abstain from sexuality. So when Christianity viewed, and this I'm talking about even within the confines of marriage, when Christianity viewed sexuality as being evil, personally I think that modern Western sensibilities on sexuality is like a backlash. It's like they have reacted against hundreds and thousands of years of sexual repression by basically becoming completely promiscuous. And in our religion, we view sexuality in a very different manner. And I think this is very important when we talk to a person born and raised in any Christian influenced land, i.e. Western Europe and America, any Western land. We need to understand that they have subconsciously been taught that religion views sexuality as being evil. And therefore, when they learn about Islam, and Islam allows healthy marriage and encourages sexuality within marriage and encourages a couple to find happiness within marriage, they find this to be a promiscuous religion. Oh, look at your religion. It wants you're allowed to marry up to 4 women, you're allowed to do this, you're allowed to do that. Because they have been ingrained to think that religion should prohibit sexuality. Our religion encourages sexuality, but in a healthy manner.
One of the brothers in the Dawah group told me that, Imam, it is our goal to give every American a copy of the Quran.
The question is simple. Are we ready to support this noble effort? Share what we've been blessed with? Islam. We invite you to join and support 877Y Islam. Let's gain the pleasure of Allah by fulfilling our collective obligation to serve His deen.